All right, Tanya, thank you very much. And Shannon.
Thank you. So I believe there are three problems we're trying to solve simultaneously when we ask ourselves, do we go big or we go home? And the first is energy systems need to be resilient to provide safe, reliable energy. They need to be such that they provide affordable energy. And they need to continually improve environmental performance to reduce environmental impacts, and in particular, to reduce global greenhouse gas emissions. And what I hope to show in the next 7 minutes is that the solutions being proposed by the Go Home side, which, as we heard in the definition, include diffuse energy, small players, microgrids, are not up to delivering on these three tasks for ourselves and for the world. And I'll start with reliability and resilience, systems that don't fail. Canada, as we all have experienced today, is a cold, geographically intense country that is livable because we have reliable energy systems that deliver diverse and resilient energy 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And today, Canada's reliable energy mix is 70% fossil fuel based, so a mix of natural gas and other fuels, 20% electricity, as we've heard a few times, and 9% other. And this powers our commercial agriculture, our major industrial processes like steel production, cement production, our commercial institutional needs, and of course, the 36 million Canadians who, as Tanya said, need to have their lights, heat, refrigeration, and vehicles work every single day. Now, because of our current big systems and the diversity of those systems, Canada is resilient to failures when they occur. If there's an ice storm in Ottawa, the power lines might fall down, but our gas systems are still there, our other systems are still there. If the opposite happens, that's still the case. And so, when we talk about electrification, when we talk about these major changes, diversity of energy is important for resilience of energy, and our current big systems provide that, and the system resilience. These systems are also resilient to growth needs. Today, the internet takes up 10% of electricity requirements. In the future, electric cars might take up even more needs. Canada today welcomes 300,000 new Canadians every year, and they all have energy needs, and they all have energy needs in our cities. And there are limits to the adaptability of go-home systems that are primarily distributed, that are primarily sometimes intermittent, and that are sometimes electricity only. Not all urban housing and urban spaces are opportunities for local energy production. Efficiency takes you a long way, but doesn't create new power. And go-home systems will always be dependent on go-big systems to mitigate these risks, and the opposite is not true. And the opposite especially is not true from a cost perspective. So today, just for scale, 15 million Canadians who live in British Columbia, Quebec, and Manitoba get 90% of their electricity from big hydro projects, big enough to make Canada an exporter of hydro. And those 50% of households in BC heat with gas, 50% of households in Manitoba heat with gas. In Ontario, another 15 million people, 60% of them get their electricity from major hydro. 26% comes from, 60% from nuclear, sorry. 26 from major hydro, and then 70% of Ontarians heat with gas, and that is a quarter of Canada's natural gas demand. Big energy. And so, to pick up from some of what Mike was saying earlier, if we want to replace all of that and electrify all of that, the first question to ask is, can the diffuse microgrids, go home systems replace the current electricity supply we have today? Could we release the James Bay Dam? Could we turn off those nuclear plants and work with go home systems? And the answer, of course, is no. And the answer is especially no when you talk about reliability and affordability. And when you talk about electrification, the heat requirements in Canada, in the two provinces I named, so in BC and in Manitoba, heat is 3 times the gigajoules of electricity in those provinces. And gas is 25% the cost of electricity. And so when we talk about massively expanding electrification, we're talking also about potentially quadrupling a major energy cost for millions of Canadians. And that's something we need to think about and work with as we plan this transformation of our systems. Otherwise, we're going to hurt people. And so, to the point our opposition said that we're on this inevitable path. No path is inevitable. And when policy is done in a way that doesn't take into account delivering on affordability, delivering on reliability, you get a backlash. And we've seen some of that in Ontario. And it's a warning to the wise. The last piece I want to talk about is climate. So what's the biggest difference Canada can make on the climate stage through our energy? Energy demand is increasing globally. We've heard it from the International Energy Agency. Canada also is connected to international and global energy. We have lots of products with embodied energy here in Canada. And there is a difference that Canada can make on the emissions of the number 1 emitter and the number 2 emitter in the world, so China and the United States. If we look at the United States, their electricity system is 75% emitting. Canada's electricity system is 75% non-emitting. And so through Canadian electricity and the build out of more large Canadian electricity systems, and Quebec wants in on this and we know they're working towards that, and potentially more nuclear, we could export to the United States and change the emissions profile of the second largest emitter in the world with big systems. And I would add also that lower emission Canadian oil can make a similar difference in both the United States and Canada. China, the largest emitter, is planning to build 220 gigawatts of coal-fired production. Yes, they're building all kinds of power, but that's 1.5 times Canada's power production annually. Canadian LNG could be exported to China and cut those emissions substantially. 90 megatons per facility. 8 of those facilities would reduce China's emissions growth by Canada's entire annual GHG emissions production. Going home can't offer that kind of climate solution. So if Canada wants to deliver big, we need to go big. Thank you.
Very good, Shannon. Thank you. Chris?
Sean, big is so 20th century. Look, we bet on Musk.